A gunshot pierced the sunset's golden veil over Cottonwood Creek, Wyoming Territory, in the autumn of 1878, sending Eleanor Cassidy Davidson rushing from her small cabin, her chestnut hair flying wild behind her. The sound wasn't unusual in these parts, but something about this one made her heart hammer against her ribs with unusual force. Her instincts rarely led her astray. Eleanor, known to most as Cassie, found him slumped against a boulder near the creek that gave the settlement its name. Blood seeped through his fingers where he clutched his side, staining his once white shirt crimson. His hat, a well-worn Stetson, had fallen to the ground beside him. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, gathering her skirts and kneeling beside him. "You're bleeding something fierce, mister." The man's eyes, the color of summer sky, found hers. Despite his pain, a weak smile touched his lips. "Madam, I've had worse paper cuts." Cassie's mouth twitched despite herself. "A joker, even with a bullet in you. Can you stand? My cabin's just yonder." He nodded, grimacing as she helped him to his feet. He was tall and lean, with shoulders broadened by years of hard work. Though injured, he moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to life on horseback. "Name's Quinn Calloway," he managed as they stumbled toward her cabin. "Most folks call me Cal." "Cassidy Davidson," she replied. "Cassie to those who know me." Inside her modest cabin, Cassie eased him onto her sole kitchen chair. Her practiced hands worked efficiently, cutting away his shirt to reveal a bullet wound that, thankfully, seemed to have passed clean through his side. "You're lucky, Mr. Calloway. Bullet didn't hit anything vital, far as I can tell." "Just Cal, please," he said, wincing as she began cleaning the wound. "And luck had nothing to do with it. Man who shot me couldn't hit a barn door from 10 paces. His aim improved only because I wasn't expecting it." Cassie worked silently for a moment, her mind racing with questions she wasn't sure she should ask. Finally, curiosity won out. "Who shot you and why?" Cal's expression darkened. "Fellow named Harlan Pierce. Claims I cheated him at cards in Cheyenne last month." "I didn't, but men like Pierce don't take kindly to losing." "Is he coming after you?" Cassie asked, concern edging her voice as she began stitching his wound. "Doubt it. Think he believes he finished the job, saw me fall into the creek, and probably figured the current would do the rest." Cassie nodded, focusing on her work. She had learned field medicine from her father, who had served as a doctor during the war. Those skills had served her well since his passing 3 years ago. "You're handy with that needle," Cal observed, watching her work with steady hands. "My father was a doctor. I learned what I could from him." She didn't elaborate further, and Cal seemed to sense her reluctance to speak more on it. When she finished bandaging him, Cassie helped Cal to her small bed in the corner. "You need rest. I'll take the chair tonight." "I can't put you out of your bed, madam. You're not putting me anywhere. I'm choosing to sleep in my chair because you've got a bullet hole in you." Her tone brooked no argument, and Cal relented with a slight smile. "Yes, madam." Cassie stayed awake long after Cal had fallen asleep, watching the rise and fall of his chest in the dim light of the oil lamp. There was something about him that intrigued her, perhaps the quiet dignity with which he bore his pain, or the kindness in his eyes despite his predicament. By morning, Cal was running a fever. Cassie bathed his forehead with cool water and forced him to drink willow bark tea. For 3 days, she tended him, leaving only briefly to check on her small garden and few chickens. On the 4th day, his fever broke. Cassie found him sitting up when she returned from collecting eggs. "You should be resting," she scolded, setting down her basket. "Been resting for days, according to the sun's position." Cal smiled. "Besides, a man ought to sit up proper when thanking a lady for saving his life." Cassie felt heat rise to her cheeks. Anyone would have done the same. "No, Miss Davidson, they wouldn't have. Most would have left a stranger to die, especially around these parts." His gaze was steady, almost unnerving in its intensity. "Why did you help me?" The question caught her off guard. I couldn't just let you bleed out by the creek." "There's more to it than that," he said softly. Cassie turned away, busying herself with the eggs. "My father believed in helping those in need. I was simply honoring his memory." Cal didn't press further, but Cassie felt his eyes on her back as she worked. She had grown unaccustomed to company these past years, living alone on the edge of town. People avoided her place, crossing themselves when they passed her on the rare occasions she ventured into Cottonwood Creek proper. Over the next week, Cal regained his strength. He insisted on helping around the cabin despite Cassie's protests, chopping firewood and mending the loose boards on her porch. His presence brought a warmth to the small cabin that Cassie hadn't realized she'd been missing. One evening as they sat before the fire, Cal finally broached the subject she'd been dreading. "Why does a woman like you live out here alone? Surely you have family somewhere." Cassie stared into the flames. "No family, not anymore." "And the townsfolk?" "I've noticed no visitors, though I saw the preacher's wife watching from the road yesterday. She looked afraid." Cassie's hands stilled in her lap. "People around here are superstitious." "About what?" She met his gaze then, searching for any sign of judgment. "About me." Cal waited, patient and still. "My mother died giving birth to me. My father raised me alone, taught me everything he knew about medicine. When he died of pneumonia 3 winters ago, folks started talking." Cassie swallowed hard. 3 children in town fell ill that same winter. 2 recovered, but 1 died. The mother blamed me, said I had cursed her boy because I'd offered a remedy and it hadn't worked. "That's nonsense," Cal said firmly. "Is it? My mother died bringing me into this world. My father, who never took sick a day in his life, died after catching a chill while I was out gathering herbs. The Wilkins boy died after I tried to help him." Cassie's voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if they're right." Cal moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "Look at me, Cassie." When she reluctantly met his eyes, he continued, "I've seen real curses in my travels, seen men whose souls were so twisted with hate they brought destruction wherever they went. That's not you." "You don't know that," she whispered. "I know enough. You saved my life when others might have let me die. There's no curse in a heart like yours." Cassie felt tears burn behind her eyes. "The whole town believes otherwise." "Then the whole town is wrong." Cal's hands tightened around hers. "Sometimes people need something to fear, something to blame when life turns hard. It's easier than accepting that tragedy just happens." They sat in silence for a long moment, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Cassie spoke. "You should know. If you stay here much longer, they'll start saying you're cursed too." Cal's smile was soft in the firelight. "I've been called worse." 2 days later, Cassie returned from gathering herbs to find Cal loading his saddlebags onto a sturdy buckskin horse. "Your horse found its way back," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Found him grazing near the creek this morning." Cal tightened the cinch, not meeting her eyes. "Figured it was a sign I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Cassie felt a hollowness open in her chest but nodded. "Of course, you're healed enough to travel now." Cal finally turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I've got business to attend to in Laramie, a job waiting and a man who'll be wondering why I'm late." "I understand." She did truly. Men like Quinn Calloway didn't settle down, especially not with women whispered about in hushed tones. "Thank you, Cassie, for everything." He mounted with only a slight wince, testament to his healing wound. Tipping his hat, he added, "I won't forget your kindness." Cassie watched him ride away, telling herself the ache in her chest was merely the loss of company after so much solitude. Nothing more. Life returned to its quiet routine for Cassie after Cal's departure. Days stretched into weeks, and autumn deepened toward winter. She preserved her garden's harvest, prepared her cabin for the coming cold, and tried not to think about blue eyes and gentle hands. The first snow had just dusted the ground when Cassie heard hoofbeats approaching one evening. Her heart leapt traitorously before she tamped down the feeling. Probably just a traveler seeking directions. But when she opened the door, Quinn Calloway stood on her porch, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. "Cal," she breathed, unable to mask her surprise. "Evening, Miss Davidson." He removed his hat, a nervous gesture she hadn't seen from him before. "I hope I'm not intruding." "No, not at all. Please come in." She stepped aside, watching as he ducked through the doorway, bringing the scent of winter air and leather with him. Inside, he stood awkwardly, hat in hands, until Cassie gestured toward the fire. "Warm yourself, I just made coffee." As she poured him a cup, Cassie's mind raced. Why had he returned? His wound had healed weeks ago, and surely his business in Laramie was concluded. Cal accepted the coffee with a grateful nod, but seemed in no hurry to explain his presence. Finally, Cassie could bear the silence no longer. "Is everything all right? You're not injured again, are you?" Cal shook his head. "No, nothing like that. He hesitated, then reached into his coat and withdrew a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something, from Laramie." Cassie accepted it with uncertain hands. "You didn't need to bring me anything." "I wanted to." His voice was soft but firm. Unwrapping the package, Cassie found a beautifully bound book of medicinal plants, more comprehensive than anything she'd ever owned. Her fingers traced the embossed cover in wonder. "Cal, this must have cost a fortune," he shrugged. "Got a good price on a job, besides, figured it might be useful, what with your healing skills. It's wonderful, thank you." She clutched the book to her chest, genuinely moved by his thoughtfulness. Cal smiled, seeming relieved by her reaction. He sipped his coffee, then set it aside. "There's something else, Cassie." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. "What is it?" "That job in Laramie, it was to escort a cattle baron's daughter to her wedding in Denver. Good pay, easy work." He paused. "I turned it down." Cassie blinked in confusion. "Why would you do that?" "Because I couldn't stop thinking about a certain healer with chestnut hair and hands gentle enough to stitch a man back together." His eyes held hers steadily. "Couldn't stop wondering if she might be willing to let me court her proper-like." The book nearly slipped from Cassie's suddenly numb fingers. "Court me, Cal, you know what people say about me." "I do." He stepped closer, his expression earnest. "And I don't give a damn. They'll say the same about you if you stay. They'll say I've bewitched you, that my curse will bring you to ruin." Cal's mouth curved into that half-smile she'd thought about too often in his absence. "Let them talk. I've never put much stock in other folks' opinions." Cassie shook her head, though her heart was racing. "It's not that simple. The isolation, the whispers it wears on a person. Only if you face it alone." Cal took her hands in his, the book now pressed between them. "But what if you didn't have to? What if there was someone who saw the blessing in you, not a curse, a blessing?" She almost laughed. "Cal, nothing good happens to people who get close to me. I beg to differ. I got shot, stumbled to your creek, and found the finest healer in Wyoming territory. Seems like good fortune to me." Despite herself, Cassie smiled. "You have an unusual definition of good fortune." "Maybe so." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "But I know what I believe, Cassie, and I believe there's something special between us worth exploring if you'll give me the chance." Cassie looked down at their joined hands. "People won't make it easy. Nothing worth having ever comes easy." He waited until she met his gaze again. "I'm not asking for promises, just a chance to show you what might be possible." The winter wind howled outside, rattling the cabin's windows. Inside, Cassie felt something long frozen beginning to thaw. "All right," she whispered. "A chance." Cal's smile could have lit the darkest night. True to his word, Cal courted Cassie with patient determination. He took a job at the livery stable in Cottonwood Creek, renting a small room above it. Each evening after work, he would walk the mile to Cassie's cabin, sometimes bringing small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, fresh honey from a traveling merchant, wildflowers as the spring thaw began. The townsfolk watched with disapproving eyes. Whispers followed Cal as he went about his business, but he paid them no mind. When old Mrs. Winters hissed that he was consorting with a witch, Cal tipped his hat and replied, "Evening, madam. Fine weather we're having." Cassie worried constantly that his association with her would harm him somehow, but Cal remained steadfast. "Stop waiting for disaster," he told her one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset. "Sometimes good things just happen, Cassie." She wanted to believe him. More than anything, she wanted to believe that the warmth growing between them wasn't destined to end in tragedy. In late spring, Their tentative courtship faced its first real test. A fever swept through Cottonwood Creek, striking down young and old alike. The town's doctor, an elderly man named Grayson, was quickly overwhelmed. Despite the town's suspicion of her, Cassie couldn't stand by while people suffered. Against Cal's concerns, she gathered her herbs and remedies and went to offer her help. "They won't want it," Cal warned as he walked beside her toward town. "Maybe not," she conceded, "but I have to try." Dr. Grayson, pragmatic in the face of so much illness, accepted Cassie's assistance gratefully. Some families refused to let her near their sick, but others, desperate as their loved ones burned with fever, reluctantly allowed her to administer her herbal remedies. For 2 weeks, Cassie worked alongside Dr. Grayson, sleeping only in brief snatches. Cal brought her meals and fresh supplies, his support unwavering. Slowly, the tide of illness receded. Most patients recovered, though 5 souls, 2 elderly men, a woman in her 40s, and 2 children were lost to the fever despite all efforts to save them. Cassie took each death hard, but none more so than little Emma Collins, who had clutched Cassie's hand and called her an angel before slipping away in the night. Cal found Cassie behind the doctor's office afterward, sobbing silently, her hands pressed against her mouth to stifle the sound. "It wasn't your fault," he said softly, gathering her into his arms. "What if it was?" Her voice was muffled against his chest. "What if they're right about me? 5 people are dead, Cal, 5. And how many lived because of your care? 20, 30. He pulled back to look into her tear-streaked face. Dr. Grayson himself said he couldn't have managed alone. The Collins family will never believe that. They'll say I cursed their daughter. Then they're fools blinded by grief. Cal's voice was firm but gentle. "You poured everything you had into saving that child. I watched you. Everyone watched you." Cassie wiped her eyes. "It doesn't matter what's true, only what people believe. It matters to me." Cal cupped her face in his calloused hands. "And it should matter to you too, Cassie. You can't live your life believing yourself cursed just because others need someone to blame." She looked up at him, this man who had walked into her life bleeding and somehow brought more healing than she could have imagined. "When did you get so wise?" His smile was tinged with sadness. "Not wisdom. Just lived long enough to know that fear makes people cruel and cruelty spreads faster than any fever." To Cassie's surprise, the fever's aftermath brought unexpected change. While some in town reinforced their belief in her curse, others began to view her differently. Dr. Grayson publicly praised her knowledge and dedication. Several families whose members she had treated nodded respectfully when they saw her in town. The whispers didn't stop entirely, but they lessened. And when Emma Collins' mother approached Cassie after church one Sunday, Cal tensed protectively at her side. Mrs. Collins' eyes were red-rimmed, her grief still raw. "Miss Davidson," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Collins." Cassie braced herself for accusations. Instead, the woman pressed something into Cassie's hand, a small handkerchief embroidered with flowers. "Emma was working on this before she fell ill. She said it was for the lady with the gentle hands." Mrs. Collins' voice broke. "I wanted you to have it." Stunned, Cassie looked down at the child's uneven stitches. "I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say." Mrs. Collins dabbed at her eyes. "My husband still blames you. He needs someone to blame, but I saw how hard you tried to save our girl, and Emma liked you. That matters to me." After Mrs. Collins walked away, Cassie stood frozen until Cal gently guided her toward home. "See," he murmured, "not everyone believes in curses." As summer bloomed across the Wyoming landscape, so too did the relationship between Cassie and Cal. Their quiet evenings together grew more intimate, not in a physical sense, though their embraces lingered longer. Their hands sought each other's more frequently, but in the sharing of their pasts, their fears, their hopes. Cal told her of his childhood in Missouri, of losing his parents to smallpox when he was 14. Of drifting westward seeking something he couldn't name until he'd stumbled, wounded, into her care. "Maybe getting shot was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me," he mused one evening as they sat by the creek, watching fireflies rise from the tall grass. Cassie laughed. Only you would consider a bullet wound fortunate. It led me to you, didn't it? His eyes, serious despite his smile, held hers. I'd take a dozen bullets for that outcome. Don't you dare, she scolded, her heart fluttering at his words. One was quite enough, thank you. On a perfect July evening, with wildflowers painting the meadow in a riot of colors and the setting sun gilding everything in gold, Cal asked Cassie to marry him. There was no ring, he admitted sheepishly, that he was saving for one, but his proposal was heartfelt, his promises sincere. Cassie hesitated, her old fears surfacing. Are you certain, Cal, truly certain? Being with me won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is, he reminded her, echoing his words from months before. Besides, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. What about the town, the whispers? Cal shrugged. Some folks have come around, others will in time, and those who don't, he took her hands in his, will build a life that doesn't depend on their approval. They said I'm cursed, she whispered, giving voice to the fear that had haunted her for years. Cal's response was immediate, his blue eyes fierce with conviction. Then let's call it blessed and move on. The simplicity of his statement, the unwavering faith behind it, broke something open inside Cassie. Years of carrying the weight of others' superstitions, of questioning her own worth, of living in isolation, all of it seemed to crack and fall away under the steady certainty of Cal's love. Yes, she said, tears and laughter mingling in her voice. Yes, I'll marry you, Quinn Calloway. Their wedding took place in September, as the aspen trees turned golden against the blue Wyoming sky. It was a small affair. Dr. Grayson and his wife, the livery owner and his family, a few townsfolk who had slowly warmed to Cassie during the fever outbreak, and surprisingly Mrs. Collins, who sat quietly in the back of the small church. The preacher, initially reluctant to perform the ceremony, was persuaded by his wife, who had been one of Cassie's fever patients. The Lord works in mysterious ways, he said during the service, bringing healing hands together with a protective heart. Cassie wore a simple dress of pale blue with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Cal couldn't take his eyes off her, his expression one of wonder as they spoke their vows. I promise to stand beside you against whatever comes, he said, his voice steady and sure. To see the blessing where others see only shadows. To remind you every day that you are not what others fear, but what I cherish. Cassie's vows were quieter but no less heartfelt. I promise to believe in what we build together more than what tried to break me apart, to trust in your faith when mine falters. To heal what I can and accept what I cannot with you by my side. They moved into Cassie's cabin, which Cal spent the autumn expanding and improving. He added a proper bedroom, enlarged the main room, and built shelves for Cassie's growing collection of medical books and herbs. Word of Cassie's healing abilities gradually spread beyond Cottonwood Creek. People from neighboring settlements occasionally arrived seeking her remedies, particularly after Dr. Grayson began referring patients with chronic ailments to her. You have a gift, the doctor told her. One that complements traditional medicine rather than opposing it. It would be selfish of me not to acknowledge that. Cal took pride in his wife's growing reputation. He eventually left the livery to start a horse training business, using the gentle methods he'd learned in his years of drifting. Between his skill with troubled horses and Cassie's healing knowledge, they built a modest but comfortable life. There were still those in town who crossed themselves when Cassie passed, who warned newcomers about the witch at the edge of town. But their voices grew fainter, less consequential, as more people experienced Cassie's kindness and skill firsthand. In the spring following their wedding, Cassie discovered she was with child. Her joy was tempered by a resurgence of old fears with the curse that supposedly followed her touch this innocent life. Cal found her weeping one evening, hands pressed protectively over her still flat stomach. "What is it, love?" he asked, kneeling beside her chair. "Are you unwell?" "What if something happens to the baby?" she whispered. What if my mother's fate becomes mine? Understanding dawned in Cal's eyes. He took her hands in his. Cassie, your mother died in a time and place with little medical care. You have knowledge she didn't have, and Dr. Grayson has promised to attend the birth. But what if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow? What if winter never ends? What if all the what-ifs we worry about never come to pass and we waste precious time in fear instead of joy? Cal's voice was gentle but firm. This child is a blessing, Cassie, our blessing. Cassie looked into his eyes, steady and true as they had been since the day she'd found him wounded by the creek. Slowly, she nodded. Our blessing, she repeated, letting herself believe it. Their daughter was born the following winter on a night when snow blanketed the world in pristine white. The labor was difficult but uncomplicated, with Dr. Grayson attending as promised, and Cal refusing to leave Cassie's side despite the doctor's initial protests. They named her Hope, Eleanor Calloway Hope, for what she represented to them both, and Eleanor after Cassie's full name, which Cal had always loved. As Cal placed their daughter in Cassie's arms, he whispered, "See, not cursed, blessed beyond measure." Looking down at Hope's perfect face, Cassie finally allowed herself to truly believe that he was right. Years passed, and the whispers about Cassie's curse faded to almost nothing. Hope grew into a spirited girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's healing touch. 2 more children joined their family, a son named Thomas after Cassie's father, and another daughter they called Grace. Cassie's reputation as a healer spread throughout the territory. She worked alongside Dr. Grayson until his retirement, then with his younger replacement, sharing her knowledge of herbal remedies that complemented his medical training. Cal's horse training business flourished as well. His patience and understanding with troubled animals became legendary, earning him clients from as far away as Cheyenne and Laramie. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cal took Cassie back to the creek where they had first met. The aspen trees were golden again, the air crisp with autumn's promise. "Do you ever regret it?" Cassie asked as they sat on the bank, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "Marrying the town witch," Cal laughed, the lines at the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Never, not for a single moment." He took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band he'd finally been able to give her after their first anniversary. "Do you regret saving the bleeding stranger?" "Never," she echoed, leaning against his shoulder. "Not for a single moment." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the creek's gentle murmur a backdrop to their thoughts. Finally, Cal spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking about what you told me that night by the fire years ago, about people believing you were cursed." Cassie nodded, memories of those dark days surprisingly distant now. "What about it?" "I think people need stories to make sense of the world. When your mother died in childbirth, when your father caught pneumonia, when that boy died during the fever, people needed to find meaning in that suffering." Cal's arm tightened around her. It was easier to believe in a curse than to accept that sometimes tragedy just happens. "And sometimes blessings just happen too," Cassie added softly. "Exactly." Cal turned to face her, his expression earnest. "What I'm trying to say is, we chose a different story, you and I. Instead of a curse, we saw a blessing, and look what that choice has brought us." Cassie thought of their children, their home, the life they'd built together. She thought of the people she'd helped heal, the trust she'd earned in a community that once feared her. She thought of Cal, steadfast and loving through it all. "It brought us everything," she whispered. Cal nodded, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Everything and more." "Because that's the power of the stories we choose to believe, Cassie. They become our truth." As they walked home hand in hand, Cassie reflected on how far they had come from that first meeting, she a woman feared and isolated, he a wounded drifter seeking nothing more than temporary shelter. "They said I'm cursed," she had whispered to him once, terrified of the power of those words. "Then let's call it blessed and move on," he had answered, offering a different story, a different path. And in choosing to walk that path together, They had transformed a whispered curse into a life overflowing with blessings, proving that sometimes the most powerful magic of all is simply having the courage to rewrite your own story.